Whispering Pines. Campground of Ghosts or Cosmic Crossovers, Chapter 1. Setting out the amber hues of dawn painted the sky as Rachel, Jake, Elsie, Sean, Luke, and Isabel made their way towards the enigmatic Whispering Pines. Tales of its otherworldly happenings had been circulating their university's hallways, and they intended to unravel the truth for themselves. Rachel, with her raven-black hair cascading down her shoulders, peered out of the car window, her azure eyes reflecting a blend of excitement and apprehension. Jake, always the storyteller, had his camera out, documenting the journey. "We are on the road, heading towards the legendary Whispering Pines," he narrated dramatically. "Who knows what awaits us? Will we find out the truth about the ghostly whispers?" Sean, skeptical as ever, rolled his eyes. "You're just hyping it up for your vlog, Jake. We'll probably just end up with some blurry photos and wild imagination." Elsie, a petite redhead with an infectious enthusiasm, interjected, "Oh, come on, Sean. Where's your sense of adventure? The Pines have been a mystery for ages. There's something there, and we're going to find it." As they neared the entrance to the campsite, a heavy mist descended, enveloping everything. The forest stood tall and silent, a sentinel guarding ancient secrets. They parked and began to set up camp, each tree's shadow seeming longer, each rustle in the bush sounding nearer. Night arrived sooner than expected. As the campfire crackled, the atmosphere grew heavy, filled with anticipation. Isabel, her blonde hair shimmering in the firelight, looked around nervously. "Did anyone else just feel that?" Luke, always the protective one, replied, "Feel what?" "That sudden chill," she whispered, rubbing her arms. The rest of the group paused, waiting, listening. Then, faintly at first, they began to hear it, a soft, indistinct murmur weaving through the trees, echoing the tales they had heard. Whispers, growing louder with every passing second. Sean's skepticism was slowly being replaced by a tinge of fear, his face paling. "Okay, that's not normal." Jake, camera in hand, tried to capture the essence of the moment. "It's happening, guys. We are hearing the whispers of Whispering Pines." Elsie, her initial excitement now tainted with fear, clutched Rachel's arm. "What are they saying? Can you hear it?" Rachel strained her ears, trying to discern the words. It was a cacophony of voices, some pleading, some laughing, and some crying. It was as if the memories of the forest were trying to communicate, to share their tales of joy and sorrow. Suddenly, the fire flared, casting grotesque, dancing shadows around them. They all jumped back, eyes wide, hearts racing. Just as quickly, the fire returned to its normal state, the flames now just a gentle flicker. Sean, swallowing hard, said, "Okay, this isn't some prank. This is real." Jake, ever the optimist, tried to lighten the mood. "Well, we wanted an adventure, didn't we? It's only the first night. Imagine the stories we'll have by the end." But as they settled into their tents, the soft lull of whispers continued, like a haunting lullaby sung by the forest itself. In the distance, a soft glow appeared. Luke peeked out of his tent, squinting to see. "Hey, do you guys see that?" he whispered, pointing towards the mysterious light. Elsie joined him, her face drained of color. "Looks like the phantom fires from the tales." Sean, unable to feign disbelief any longer, whispered, "What have we gotten ourselves into?" The night wore on, with the friends clutching their sleeping bags tightly, the haunting sounds and sights of Whispering Pines keeping them on edge. The legends were proving to be true, and they had only just arrived. As dawn approached, the atmosphere lightened, but the weight of the night's experiences bore down on them. They knew they had embarked on an adventure like no other, and the Whispering Pines had only begun to reveal its secrets. Chapter 2. Into the unknown, the morning sun filtered through the dense canopy of whispering pines, casting dappled shadows that danced with the leaves. The friends, though bleary-eyed from the haunting events of the previous night, gathered around their makeshift breakfast nook, each person processing the experience in their own way. Sean, who had started the trip as a skeptic, seemed the most rattled. He kept glancing over his shoulder, as if expecting some spectral figure to appear at any moment. "We need to get to the bottom of this," he muttered, poking at his breakfast. What were those voices? Why are we hearing them? Elsie, who always held a deep interest in folklore and legend, tried to piece together the snippets of conversations they had heard. Some sounded old, others more recent. But they were all lost, somehow. As if they were reaching out for something or someone. Jake, who had spent the morning reviewing his footage, called out from his tent, "You need to see this." Gathering around Jake's camera, they watched in amazement. The footage clearly showed shifting footprints in the soil around their campsite, footprints that appeared and vanished mysteriously, leading both into and out of their camp, circling their tents. Rachel, her face pale, whispered, "We weren't alone last night." Isabel, who had been quiet all morning, shivered. "I told you I felt a cold spot. It wasn't my imagination. Something, or someone, was moving around our camp." Jake continued to fast forward the footage. It showed the fire flaring up and the mysterious phantom fires in the distance. But most chillingly, just as dawn broke, a blurred figure appeared on the screen for a mere second before vanishing. Luke, trying to be the voice of reason, said, "Maybe it's just a glitch or an animal." Elsie, her eyes wide, disagreed. "That wasn't an animal, and that wasn't a glitch. We're dealing with something beyond our understanding." As the day progressed, they decided to explore the forest. Armed with cameras, notebooks, and an unwavering sense of determination, they ventured deeper into the heart of Whispering Pines. Elsie, leading the way, guided them to a clearing. A chill filled the air, and the daylight seemed to dim. In the center stood a gnarled, ancient-looking tree, its bark etched with what appeared to be symbols and runes. Isabel traced the markings, her fingers trembling. "These symbols, they're old, really old. They speak of doorways and bridges between realms." Suddenly, the air grew cold, and Rachel, standing away from the group, whispered, "Do you feel that?" As if on cue, childlike apparitions began to emerge from the trees, their faces a mix of curiosity and sadness. They moved silently, pausing to look at the group before fading away. Elsie, her voice barely above a whisper, said, "Children of the forest. They're trapped here, lost between realms." Sean, his skepticism now replaced with fear, said, "We need to leave. Now." But Jake, ever the documentarian, continued filming, hoping to capture evidence of the paranormal. "We can't go yet. We need to understand this, to help them if we can." As they made their way back to the campsite, they couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The forest seemed alive, its whispers growing louder, its mysteries deepening. That evening, as they sat around the campfire, they discussed their findings. Elsie, having done some research, said, "The legends speak of a settler community that vanished without a trace. Maybe that's who we're hearing, those lost souls trying to communicate." Rachel, staring into the fire, replied, "But what do they want? Why reach out to us?" Jake, deep in thought, said, "We need to spend another night, document everything. Maybe we can find a way to help them." As the night wore on, the spectral activity intensified. The phantom fires seemed nearer, and the whispers grew clearer, more desperate. Suddenly, Mia, who had been silent, stood up. "I sense them. Their energy. They're trying to tell us something. We need to listen." The group, now fully immersed in the enigma of Whispering Pines, prepared themselves for another night of eerie encounters, hoping to decipher the messages from beyond and uncover the truth that the forest held. But as the first whispers of the night reached their ears, they couldn't shake the feeling that the spirits of Whispering Pines had more in store for them than they could ever have imagined. Chapter 3. Messages from the beyond the moon hovered high above Whispering Pines, casting silvery beams that pierced the thick canopy. A palpable sense of anticipation hung in the air. After their encounters earlier, there was no doubt that they were not alone in these woods. Dinner was a quiet affair. Every rustle, every distant hoot, and even the rhythmic chirping of crickets seemed amplified, making everyone jumpy. Mia, who had been distant most of the evening, seemed lost in thought, her brow furrowed. Jake, the first to break the silence, murmured, "We need a plan. If there's a way to communicate with these spirits, we need to find it." Elsie nodded in agreement, her fingers absent-mindedly tracing the runes they'd seen earlier on the ancient tree. There has to be a connection between those symbols and the voices. Maybe it's a key. Isabel, who had been skimming through a borrowed book on ancient runes, said, "Some of these symbols signify a portal, a bridge between dimensions. If the legends are true, maybe these spirits are trapped, unable to move on." Sean, having finally come to terms with the reality of their situation, added, "It's not just about communicating. We need to help them." As they sat in a circle, each person focused on the campfire, which danced with an almost hypnotic rhythm. Mia, her voice barely above a whisper, said, "I think I can reach out to them." All eyes turned to her. She took a deep breath and began to chant in a language unfamiliar to the rest. Her voice echoed through the woods, and an uncanny silence settled around them. Then, like a faint echo, a response, multiple voices began to harmonize with Mia's chant. The campfire's flames surged, casting long, wavering shadows. From the depths of the forest, spectral figures began to emerge. Unlike before, these apparitions seemed clearer, more defined. A woman dressed in settler attire approached the group. Behind her, children and men materialized, forming a semicircle around the camp. Their eyes, filled with a mix of curiosity and sorrow, locked onto the group. Rachel, holding back tears, said, "They look so real, so sad." The woman, her voice a soft, melancholy lilt, spoke, "We are the lost souls of Whispering Pines. Trapped between worlds, seeking a way home." Jake, ever the inquisitive one, asked, "What happened? Why are you trapped?" The spectral woman replied, "A ritual gone wrong. We tried to harness the power of the pines, to communicate with the beyond, to gain knowledge. But we were deceived, betrayed by one of our own." Isabel's eyes widened in realization. "The runes. They're a part of the ritual, aren't they?" The spirit nodded. "They were meant to be a bridge, but they became our prison. Only by completing the ritual can we be free." Elsie, her voice trembling, asked, "How can we help?" The apparition pointed to Mia. "She is the key. With her gift, she can bridge the gap, mend the rift." Mia, taking a deep breath, replied, "Tell me what to do." The spirits guided the group deeper into the forest, to a hidden glade where the air was thick with energy. A stone circle lay in the center, with runes etched all around. The spectral woman instructed Mia to stand in the center and for the rest to join hands, forming a protective circle around her. As Mia began to chant, the forest responded. The wind howled, trees rustled, and the ground trembled. The spirits began to converge on the stone circle, their forms becoming more tangible with every passing moment. Suddenly, from the shadows, a menacing figure emerged. Unlike the other spirits, this one had a dark aura, its eyes glowing with malice. Sean, his voice filled with dread, whispered, "That must be the betrayer." The malevolent spirit, sensing Mia's power, lunged at her, trying to disrupt the ritual. But the protective circle held strong, repelling the dark entity. Elsie, summoning her courage, shouted, "You won't stop us. We'll free these souls." The battle of wills raged on, with Mia's chant growing louder and more forceful. As dawn approached, a blinding light enveloped the glade. The malevolent spirit let out a gut-wrenching scream and was pulled into the earth, vanishing. When the light faded, the lost souls of Whispering Pines stood there, now free from their ethereal chains. The settler woman, tears in her eyes, said, "Thank you. You have freed us." As the spirits began to fade, heading to the afterlife, the group, exhausted but triumphant, made their way back to camp. Luke, looking at the rising sun, remarked, "We did it." "We actually did it." Isabel, her eyes filled with tears, said, "We gave them peace." As the group packed up, ready to leave Whispering Pines behind, they knew they had experienced something profound, something that would stay with them forever. But the forest, with its age-old secrets, whispered a final message, a reminder that every legend has a foundation in truth and that some mysteries are best left unsolved. Chapter 4. Unintended consequences. After the events of the previous night, the group felt a mixture of euphoria and exhaustion. The morning sun warmed the campsite, birds chirped joyously, and the scent of pine was refreshing. It was a stark contrast to the haunting chill they had experienced. "We did it," Sean exclaimed, packing up his tent. "We actually freed those spirits." Isabel looked at the now calm forest, a distant look in her eyes. "Yes, but at what cost?" Confused, Jake asked, "What do you mean?" "We did something good, right?" Isabel hesitated, then said, "While we may have freed the innocent spirits, I fear we might have released something far more sinister." The group paused, sensing the weight of her words. Rachel, always the optimist, tried to lighten the mood. "Come on, we followed the ritual, right? We did what we were supposed to." Isabel nodded. "That's true. But rituals, especially ones that deal with the fabric of dimensions, have repercussions. There's always a balance. If you free something, something else may take its place." Mia, who had been quiet, finally spoke. "We felt a dark presence during the ritual. Maybe that's what you're sensing." Isabel shook her head. "No, it's not just that. Remember the runes we saw? They were a protective seal. With the ritual complete, that seal is now broken." Sean, realizing the gravity of the situation, muttered, "So, we may have just opened a door to something worse." As the group pondered this, Elsie recalled the legend. The settlers originally attempted the ritual to gain knowledge from other dimensions. Maybe that's what the betrayer was after, power from another dimension. Isabel's eyes widened. That's it. The betrayer, being part of the original ritual, acted as a counterbalance, keeping whatever was on the other side at bay. Now that he's been banished, there's no telling what might come through. The realization hit the group like a ton of bricks. Luke, panic evident in his voice, said, "We need to reseal the portal." As the group strategized, the forest grew eerily quiet. The chirping of the birds ceased, and a chilling wind began to blow. From deep within the woods, a low growl echoed, growing in intensity. Suddenly, the campfire reignited, its flames dancing wildly, casting erratic shadows. An otherworldly scream pierced the air, sending shivers down their spines. The ground trembled, and the trees seemed to lean inwards, as if trying to protect the camp. "We're not alone," Mia whispered, her eyes darting around the campsite. "It's here." From the shadows, a monstrous entity emerged, its form constantly shifting and changing. It was an amalgamation of every nightmarish creature one could imagine. Its eyes, glowing a deep red, fixed on the group. Isabel, her voice trembling, said, "It's a dimensional entity, drawn here by the rift." Jake, clutching a makeshift staff, took a step forward. "We need to repel it, push it back to its own dimension." Mia, gathering her energy, began to chant. A protective barrier formed around the group. The entity, sensing Mia's power, let out a guttural roar and lunged at them. A fierce battle ensued. Mia's chants, combined with Isabel's knowledge of runes, formed a formidable defense. The others, using whatever they had at hand, managed to keep the entity at bay. The creature, sensing it was outnumbered, let out a deafening scream and began to summon other entities. Dark shadows began to form around the campsite, each one taking on a grotesque form. Sean, determination in his eyes, said, "We need to reseal the portal." Now. The group made their way to the stone circle. Elsie, frantically searching through her book, found a sealing ritual. "We need to form a pentagram and channel our energy through Mia." As they formed the pentagram, Mia, standing at its center, began to chant. The ground trembled, and the sky turned a deep shade of crimson. The entity, sensing its imminent banishment, let out a final roar and charged at the group. But it was too late. A blinding light shot up from the stone circle, enveloping the entity and the shadows it had summoned. A shockwave radiated outwards, pushing everything away. When the dust settled, the forest was calm once again. The sun, now high in the sky, cast a warm glow on the group. Isabel, exhausted but relieved, said, "It's done. The portal is sealed." Mia, her energy spent, collapsed. Jake rushed to her side. "She's okay, just drained." The group, realizing the magnitude of what they had accomplished, embraced each other. They had faced the unknown and come out victorious. As they packed up their camp, Sean remarked, "We may have closed the portal, but we've opened our eyes to the mysteries of the universe." Rachel, looking at the now tranquil forest, replied, "Whispering Pines will always be a place of wonder and mystery. But it's also a reminder that some doors are best left unopened." With that, the group left the forest, their bond stronger than ever. They knew that while they had faced unimaginable horrors, they had also discovered the true strength that lay within them. Chapter 5. The lingering residue. 3 days had passed since the battle at Whispering Pines. The group had tried to return to normalcy, yet an unspoken tension hovered among them. They gathered in Luke's apartment, strewn with artifacts, books, and journals from their recent camping trip. Isabel was the first to break the silence. "We need to talk about what happened." Sean, absently stirring a cup of tea, replied, "I've been trying not to." Jake, with Mia resting her head on his shoulder, added, We can't pretend it didn't happen. We all felt it. There's a residual effect. Like something has attached itself to us. Elsie held up her grandmother's journal. This journal has answers, but also a lot of gaps. We need to dig deeper. As they began to discuss their next steps, Rachel's phone buzzed. She picked it up and paled, showing the group a news article. A local hiker had disappeared in Whispering Pines. It can't be a coincidence, Mia whispered. Suddenly, the lights flickered and a familiar coldness enveloped the room. The whispering voices, now louder and more distorted, echoed around them. "They're here," Sean murmured. From the shadows, spectral figures began to emerge. They weren't the lost settlers they had encountered before. These were different, more menacing. Isabel recognized one figure, her face a mask of horror. It's him, the betrayer. But he wasn't alone. Alongside him stood other twisted souls, their features grotesque and contorted with rage. Rachel, her voice trembling, said, "We closed the portal, but some remnants must have stayed behind." Elsie, frantically flipping through the journal, cried out, "The ritual we performed was for the settlers. These entities might be remnants from other dimensions, lingering residues." The betrayer, his voice echoing with malice, spoke, "You think you can banish us? We are tethered to this world now." Isabel, summoning her courage, replied, "We will find a way to send you back." The room darkened further as the spectral figures moved closer. Their intentions were clear: revenge. Mia, tapping into her latent energy, formed a protective barrier around the group. The spectral figures hissed and recoiled. "We need a plan," Sean exclaimed. Jake, grabbing a crystal from Luke's table, said, "We need to strengthen our bond." Our combined energy pushed them back before. Forming a circle, they each held a piece of the crystal. A warm, golden light emanated from it, growing in intensity. The room began to vibrate, and the spectral figures wavered. Isabel, her voice full of conviction, began chanting an ancient banishing spell. The figures, unable to withstand the combined force of the group, began to fade. But the betrayer, with a final act of defiance, lunged at Isabel. Sean, reacting quickly, stepped in front of her, taking the full brunt of the attack. With a deafening scream, the betrayer and the other spectral remnants were banished. The room, now bathed in the warm glow of the crystal, returned to normal. Isabel rushed to Sean's side. He was unresponsive. Mia, tears streaming down her face, said, "He sacrificed himself for us." Elsie, her voice breaking, replied, "We need to save him." The group, with newfound determination, began searching the journals and books for a way to bring Sean back. Rachel, finding a passage in one of the older texts, read aloud, "To bring back a soul lost between dimensions, one must find the anchor that tethers them to this world." Jake, realizing the implications, said, "We are his anchor. Our bond, our friendship." Mia nodded. "We need to tap into our collective energy once more. Form a bridge for him." Gathering around Sean, they each placed a hand on him. Drawing from the energy of the crystal and their bond, they reached out to Sean. In the space between dimensions, Sean floated, surrounded by an endless void. He could hear the distant echoes of his friends, calling out to him. Following their voices, he began to move towards them. The pull of the other dimension was strong, but the bond he shared with his friends was stronger. With a jolt, Sean was back in the room. He gasped for breath, his friends' relieved faces coming into focus. "We did it," Isabel whispered, tears of joy in her eyes. Sean, weakly smiling, replied, "You did." The group embraced, their bond stronger than ever. They had faced unimaginable horrors and come out victorious. But as they celebrated their victory, they couldn't shake the feeling that their battle with the other dimensions was far from over. The residue of what they had unleashed still lingered, and they knew that they would have to face it once more. But for now, they were together, and that's all that mattered. Chapter 6. Return to the Pines. The morning sun cast a warm glow over the city. It seemed ironic that such a peaceful day should follow the events of the previous night. The group, now more like a family, had stayed at Luke's apartment, reluctant to be alone. Sleep had been fleeting, filled with dreams of whispering voices and spectral figures. Isabel was the first to rise. She went to the kitchen, finding Rachel already there, brewing coffee. "Couldn't sleep either?" Isabel asked. Rachel shook her head. "Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them, those entities." Isabel nodded in understanding. "I keep thinking about what Elsie said. That these were just remnants. What if there are more out there?" As the morning wore on, the rest of the group gathered in the living room. The discussion quickly turned to the events at Whispering Pines. Elsie, deep in thought, said, "My grandmother's journal hinted at multiple dimensions. Perhaps, in our attempt to close the portal, we only scratched the surface." Jake sighed. "So, what do we do now?" Mia, her gaze fixed outside, replied, "We go back." There was a collective gasp. "Back to Whispering Pines?" Sean asked, disbelief evident in his voice. Mia nodded. "It's the epicenter. We need to understand what we're dealing with." Luke, running a hand through his hair, said, "It's dangerous. We barely made it out last time." Elsie, determination in her eyes, responded, "We have the knowledge, the tools. We just need a plan." And so, as the day progressed, the group formulated a plan. They would return to Whispering Pines under the cover of night, armed with Elsie's grandmother's journal, crystals, and various other artifacts. The evening found them at the edge of the forest, the familiar path to Whispering Pines stretching out before them. The air was thick with tension, and every rustle, every shadow made them jump. As they walked, Sean, looking troubled, said, "The last time we were here, we were reactive. This time, we need to be proactive." Rachel, clutching the journal close to her chest, nodded. "We need to find the heart of the portal, seal it for good." Hours seemed to pass as they ventured deeper into the forest. Strange, otherworldly noises surrounded them, but there was no sign of the spectral entities. Suddenly, Mia stopped. "Do you feel that?" A strange, pulsating energy emanated from the ground, growing stronger as they moved forward. Isabel whispered, "It's coming from that clearing." The group moved cautiously towards the clearing, where an ancient stone circle stood. In the center was a large, jagged stone, glowing with a pulsating light. Elsie, studying the journal, said, "This is it. The heart of the portal." Jake, looking around nervously, replied, "It's too quiet." Suddenly, the clearing was filled with the distorted whispering voices. From the shadows, spectral figures began to emerge, their forms more solid and menacing than before. "They're protecting the portal," Rachel exclaimed. The group formed a protective circle, with the jagged stone at the center. The spectral figures closed in, their intent clear. Mia, her voice firm, said, "We need to act fast. Focus your energy on the stone." As the group channeled their energy, the stone began to glow brighter. The spectral figures hissed and recoiled, but they were relentless. Sean, sweat beading on his forehead, shouted, "It's not enough." From the edge of the clearing, a familiar figure appeared. It was the betrayer, his form more twisted and malevolent. Isabel, her voice filled with rage, said, "You won't stop us." The betrayer, laughing, replied, "You cannot seal the portal. It is a gateway to countless dimensions." Elsie, frantically searching the journal, cried out, "We need a sacrifice. Something to anchor the seal." The group looked at each other, realization dawning. Luke, tears in his eyes, said, "I'll do it." Before anyone could react, Luke stepped forward, placing his hand on the jagged stone. A blinding light enveloped the clearing, and the spectral figures, including the betrayer, were sucked into the portal. As the light faded, the group found themselves alone in the clearing. The stone was now dormant, the pulsating energy gone. Luke lay on the ground, lifeless. Mia, kneeling beside him, whispered, "He sacrificed himself for us." Isabel, tears streaming down her face, said, "We need to honor his memory." Elsie, clutching the journal close to her chest, replied, "We sealed the portal, but the battle is far from over. We need to ensure that no one else falls victim to the allure of Whispering Pines." And so, as dawn broke, the group left the forest, their mission accomplished but at a great cost. They vowed to protect the secrets of Whispering Pines, ensuring that the horrors of the other dimensions remained sealed forever. Chapter 7. Whispers beyond the grave. The loss of Luke was palpable, a void that settled heavily upon the group, overshadowing even the victory they had won at Whispering Pines. Days turned into weeks, and the once tight-knit group began to drift apart, each grappling with grief in their own ways. Rachel retreated to her grandmother's study, poring over the countless journals, books, and artifacts that lined the shelves. She was searching for a way, any way, to communicate with Luke, to gain some semblance of closure. One evening, as dusk painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, she came across a slim, ancient book titled Conversations with the Beyond. Intrigued, she opened it, her fingers brushing the brittle pages. Isabel, on the other hand, sought solace in nature. She would often wander the forests surrounding Whispering Pines, listening to the whispering winds, imagining they carried messages from Luke. She would sit for hours by the now dormant stone circle, the very place where Luke had made his final stand, hoping to feel his presence. Mia and Sean found strength in each other's company. They started meeting more frequently, taking long walks, or just sitting silently, reminiscing about Luke. Their shared grief brought them closer, and they began to confide in each other, forming a bond deeper than before. One evening, as the group gathered at Rachel's house, a ritual of sorts they had maintained since Luke's sacrifice, Rachel hesitantly shared her discovery. "I found this," she said, placing the slim book on the coffee table. "It speaks of a ritual to communicate with the departed." Mia frowned. "Do you think it's wise, after all we've been through?" Elsie, who had been quiet, looked up, her eyes haunted. "It might be dangerous, but I understand the need for closure." After a moment of silence, Sean said, "If we're doing this, we do it together." The ritual required specific herbs, candles, and most importantly, an item belonging to the departed. Rachel remembered the pendant Luke always wore, a family heirloom passed down through generations. Isabel, who had kept it after Luke's passing, handed it over. The group sat in a circle, the room dimly lit by the flickering candles. Rachel began chanting the incantations from the book, her voice steady, yet filled with anticipation. The air grew cold, and the candles flickered erratically. Suddenly, the pendant levitated, glowing with a soft light. A voice, faint but unmistakable, filled the room. "Why have you called me?" It was Luke. Tears streamed down Isabel's face. "We needed to know you're all right." The voice, tinged with sadness, replied, "I am at peace, but you must move on. My sacrifice was to protect you, not bind you to the past." Rachel, her voice choked with emotion, said, "We miss you." We needed closure. The pendant glowed brighter, and Luke's voice became clearer. "I miss you all too, but the veil between our worlds is thin, and not all spirits are benevolent. You must end the ritual now." But before they could act, another voice, darker, more malevolent, cut through. "You have opened a door you cannot close." The room grew colder, the candle flames turned blue, and shadows danced on the walls. Figures, distorted and menacing, began to materialize. Sean, panic evident in his voice, said, "We need to close the portal." Elsie, quickly scanning the book, cried out, "The ritual must be reversed." As Rachel began chanting the incantations backward, the figures advanced, their intent clear. Mia and Sean, using the crystals from their previous encounter, formed a protective barrier, holding the entities at bay. The pendant, still glowing, floated towards Isabel. Luke's voice, now filled with urgency, said, "Use the pendant. Channel your energy through it." Isabel, clutching the pendant, focused her energy, and a blinding light filled the room. The malevolent entities were pushed back, shrieking in anger and frustration. As the last words of the incantation left Rachel's lips, the room returned to normal, the figures gone. The group, exhausted but relieved, sat in silence, processing what had just transpired. Elsie, her voice shaky, said, "We can't play with forces we don't understand. The barrier between our world and the beyond is too fragile." Rachel, regret evident in her eyes, whispered, "I just wanted to hear his voice one more time." Mia, placing a comforting hand on Rachel's shoulder, said, "We all did. But we have to find other ways to remember him." Sean, looking around at the group, added, "We have each other, and that's what matters." As the night wore on, the group shared memories of Luke, laughing and crying, finding solace in each other's company. They realized that while they couldn't bring Luke back, they could keep his memory alive by living their lives to the fullest, cherishing the bonds they had forged. The events of that night served as a stark reminder of the thin veil separating their world from the unknown, and the group vowed never to tamper with it again. They had learned, at a great cost, that some doors were best left unopened. Chapter 8. The return to Whispering Pines. In the weeks that followed their harrowing experience, a tangible tension surrounded the group. Each day was a struggle to find normalcy, to move on, but the past seemed to cling to them with a tenacious grip. Haunting dreams and whispers in the night rendered sleep elusive. An undercurrent of unease, like the cold fingers of the unknown, threatened to choke their fragile peace. One evening, Rachel was awoken by a call from Elsie. Her voice, usually calm and composed, trembled with raw fear. "They're back," she whispered. "The spirits. They've returned." It was as if a dark cloud had once again settled over Whispering Pines. Odd occurrences became common. Doors slamming shut, items disappearing and reappearing, and the ever-present whispers, always lurking just beyond comprehension. With a heavy heart, the group gathered at Isabel's house. "We can't keep running from this," Mia declared, her face a mask of determination. "We have to face this head-on." Elsie, leafing through an old book, said, "There's an old legend about Whispering Pines." An ancient ritual that might help us get rid of these spirits for good. Sean looked skeptical. Another ritual? After what happened last time? Rachel, her eyes fixed on the flickering flames of the fireplace, spoke up. We don't have a choice. We either fight, or we live in fear. The ritual Elsie had discovered was complex and required a series of artifacts that were scattered around Whispering Pines. To stand any chance of success, they would need to retrieve them all. With renewed resolve, the group split up, each tasked with finding one of the artifacts. As Mia ventured deeper into the forest, she felt an overwhelming sensation of being watched. The very air seemed charged with anticipation. A sudden rustling caught her attention, and she turned to find a shadowy figure watching her from a distance. Panic surged, but before she could react, the figure vanished. Elsewhere, Sean stumbled upon an old, dilapidated hut. The windows were boarded up, but a faint glow emitted from within. Approaching cautiously, he peered through a gap in the boards. Inside, a group of spectral figures danced around a fire, their ethereal forms shifting and merging. They chanted in a language unknown to him, their voices echoing in a haunting melody. In the center, atop a stone pedestal, lay one of the artifacts. Rachel, following an old map, arrived at a clearing dominated by a large, moss-covered stone. According to the legend, this was where the final artifact lay hidden. As she approached, the ground beneath her began to tremble. The stone shifted, revealing a dark void beneath. From the abyss, hands, decayed and skeletal, reached out, grasping at the air, yearning to drag her into the darkness. The group's quest for the artifacts was fraught with peril, each encountering obstacles that tested their resolve. But, driven by determination and the memories of their fallen friend, they persevered. Gathering once more at the stone circle, the artifacts laid before them, Elsie began the ritual. The air crackled with energy, and the very fabric of reality seemed to warp and twist. The spirits, sensing the impending danger, materialized, their forms distorted and malevolent. Mia, channeling the power of the artifacts, created a protective barrier, shielding the group from the vengeful entities. But it was clear that they were outnumbered. The spirits clawed and raged against the barrier, their anger palpable. Suddenly, a familiar voice pierced the chaos. "You are not alone." It was Luke. From the ether, a legion of benevolent spirits materialized, led by Luke. They clashed with the malevolent entities in a battle of wills, light against darkness. The very ground shook, and the sky above turned a blood red. Elsie, her voice rising in a crescendo, chanted the final words of the ritual. A blinding light enveloped the stone circle, and when it faded, the spirits, both benevolent and malevolent, were gone. Exhausted but triumphant, the group embraced, their ordeal finally at an end. As the first rays of dawn broke over Whispering Pines, a newfound peace settled over the land. The legend, it seemed, had finally been put to rest. However, as they left the stone circle, a whisper, faint but unmistakable, lingered in the wind. A reminder that the veil between worlds is thin and that some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed. Chapter 9. Echoes of the past. Whispering Pines, with its sprawling woods and air of ancient secrecy, had always drawn the curious and the brave. But for the group, it was no longer a place of simple wonder. It was a haunted ground of memories, some fond and others chilling. 2 months had passed since the ritual, and the group had tried their best to return to their everyday lives. But for Rachel, the past refused to remain buried. She found herself drawn to the woods time and again, looking for answers, looking for closure. The familiar paths she once walked with joy now held a foreboding stillness. The silence, however, was deceptive. For Rachel, the echoes of the past murmured softly, pulling her deeper into the maze of trees. One cool evening, as shadows grew long and the world donned an azure hue, Rachel felt an irresistible pull towards an old, forgotten trail. Following it, she arrived at a dilapidated wooden cabin, its roof covered in moss and windows fogged with age. The sight of the cabin shouldn't have been surprising, but Rachel felt an uncanny sense of recognition, as though she had been there before, in another time, another life. Pushing open the creaking door, she stepped inside. The interior was modest and showed signs of habitation from decades ago. An old photo frame caught her eye. Wiping away the accumulated dust, she gasped. It was a picture of a group of young people, much like her own. But what chilled her to the bone was the striking resemblance one of the women bore to herself. As she picked up the photograph, the room grew cold, and a spectral figure materialized before her. The spirit, a young woman with sorrowful eyes, spoke in hushed tones. "You've returned. After all these years, you've come back to me." Rachel, her heart pounding, tried to make sense of the situation. "Who are you? Why do you look like me?" The spirit, tears forming in her ethereal eyes, replied, "I am Clara. Long ago, we were one. Your past life. Our bond is timeless." Clara recounted her story, a tale of love, betrayal, and a ritual gone horribly wrong. She had been part of a group, not unlike Rachel's, who had meddled with forces beyond their understanding. In a bid to connect with other realms, they had accidentally unleashed malevolent entities into the world. Clara, having tried to protect her friends, had paid the ultimate price, her spirit trapped in an endless loop of despair. Rachel, absorbing the revelation, felt a mixture of shock and sympathy. She realized that the events they had experienced were not isolated. Time, it seemed, was a circle where the past and the present danced endlessly, repeating patterns and mistakes. She shared her recent experiences with Clara, hoping to find a way to set things right for both of them. Clara, though trapped in her spectral form, had knowledge of the ancient ways. She spoke of a forbidden ritual, one that could merge the energies of past and present, giving them a chance to correct the mistakes of both lifetimes. But the ritual was not without its dangers. Disturbing the fabric of time could have unforeseen consequences, tearing apart the very fabric of reality. But for Rachel, the possibility of righting the wrongs and freeing Clara was a chance she was willing to take. She left the cabin with a heavy heart and a resolve of steel, the photograph clutched tightly in her hand. The next step was clear. She would need to gather her friends once more. The battle against the supernatural was far from over. The echoes of the past had resounded in the present, and the two timelines were now irrevocably intertwined. As she exited the woods, the first hints of dawn painted the horizon. But in her heart, a storm was brewing, a tempest that would challenge the very boundaries of time and existence. Chapter 10. Unraveled threads. The next morning, as the sleepy town of Pine Creek began to stir, Rachel hurriedly dialed numbers, one after the other. Her conversations were brief but insistent. By noon, the group had congregated at Jeremy's house, an old Victorian mansion overlooking the dense forest. Rachel took a deep breath as she recounted the previous night's revelation. The room was thick with tension, and disbelief showed on the faces around her. Simon, ever the skeptic, raised an eyebrow. "So you're telling us that the spirit of your past life has asked you to mess with the fabric of time?" Rachel responded, her voice laced with urgency. I know how it sounds, but we need to correct what's been wronged. Not just for Clara, but for all of us. Jeremy, while pensive, was supportive. What do we need to do? Clara mentioned an old ritual. Rachel said, it's supposed to connect past energies to the present, giving us a chance to rewrite the past. Serena interjected, her voice soft but worried. Isn't that dangerous? Won't we be altering the course of history? Rachel hesitated. Yes. But if we succeed, we might free Clara and protect ourselves from those entities forever. The room was filled with a heavy silence as everyone processed the weight of the decision before them. Natalie, finally breaking the quiet, murmured, I'm in. One by one, the group pledged their support. They had faced the supernatural together, and they were not going to back down now. Jeremy, tapping into his family's extensive library on occultism, managed to locate the ritual. The instructions were clear but daunting. It would need a perfect balance of elements from both past and present. As they went over the list of ingredients, Rachel produced the photograph she'd found in the cabin. As the others looked on, she lit a candle and passed the photo through its flame. The picture didn't burn but changed, revealing a map of whispering pines. We need to perform the ritual at the heart of the forest, Rachel murmured, pointing at a marked spot on the map. As night approached, the group, armed with supplies, headed deep into the woods. The atmosphere grew thick and palpable. Shadows seemed to move of their own accord, and the whispering voices grew more distinct with every step. At the heart of the forest, they found a clearing dominated by an ancient, gnarled tree. Its trunk was scarred with age-old symbols, and its roots seemed to stretch into the very depths of the earth. The tree pulsed with energy, serving as a bridge between worlds. Setting up a circle with salt and candles, Rachel took her position at the center. With the group forming a protective barrier around her, she began chanting verses from the ritual. The night grew colder, the winds howled, and the very ground trembled beneath them. From the shadows, spectral figures emerged. These were not malevolent entities but spirits of the past, including Clara, who joined hands with Rachel. The energy in the clearing surged as the two timelines began to merge. But just as victory seemed within grasp, a violent force disrupted the circle. A portal opened, its vortex threatening to suck everything into its dark void. The malevolent entities they had battled before, now in fuller form, descended upon the clearing, enraged by the group's audacity to challenge their reign. The chaos was deafening. The group fought valiantly, using everything at their disposal to protect Rachel and keep the ritual going. Simon, utilizing his knowledge of ancient symbols, drew protective barriers. Jeremy and Natalie chanted verses to repel the entities. Serena, calling upon the spirits of the forest, summoned nature's wrath against the invaders. As the battle raged on, Rachel, with Clara beside her, focused all her energy on closing the portal. The weight of centuries bore down on them, but their combined strength was formidable. With a deafening roar, a blinding light enveloped the clearing. And then, silence. The group found themselves back in the clearing, but the ancient tree was now in full bloom, its leaves shimmering with an otherworldly glow. The portal was gone, and so were the entities. Clara, now a solid figure, approached Rachel. "You did it," she whispered, tears of gratitude in her eyes. "You've set us free." Rachel hugged Clara tightly, feeling an overwhelming sense of completion. The group had not only saved themselves but also liberated countless souls trapped by the malevolent forces. As dawn broke, the group, exhausted but victorious, made their way back to Pine Creek. The town seemed unchanged, but there was a newfound peace in the air. Rachel, looking at the blooming tree from a distance, knew that they had not only rewritten history but also forged a new destiny. The threads of time had been unraveled and woven anew. The legacy of Whispering Pines, with its blend of horror and hope, would be passed down for generations to come. Chapter 11. The echoes remain. Life in Pine Creek slowly returned to its usual rhythm. The sleepy town, with its undulating hills and quiet streets, showed no outward signs of the recent tumultuous events. The summer sun shone brightly, casting golden rays on the town's old structures, which stood as silent witnesses to its storied past. Yet, beneath the calm surface, unease lingered. Rachel found herself drawn to the forest clearing day after day. Each time she approached the now flourishing ancient tree, a strange sensation washed over her, a mix of nostalgia and a persistent feeling that something remained unresolved. On one such day, as she sat reading under the tree, a shadow fell over her. Looking up, she found herself face to face with an elderly woman. Dressed in faded clothes and sporting silver hair, the woman had a kind of ageless beauty. Her eyes, however, held a depth of sadness. "You've done a great service, dear," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "But you must know, the ties that bind the realms are intricate and complex." Rachel squinted at her, trying to place her face. "Do I know you?" The old woman smiled wistfully. "In a manner of speaking, yes. I was once a resident of this town. I am Eleanor." Rachel gasped, recalling the tales about Eleanor, the seer who had mysteriously vanished years ago. "You? But how?" Eleanor sighed. "When you and your friends conducted the ritual, you freed many trapped souls. But the consequences of meddling with time and dimensions are far-reaching. The portal may be closed, but the echoes of its existence remain." Rachel's heart raced. "What does that mean?" "You've shifted the balance," Eleanor explained, her voice gaining a sense of urgency. "While Clara and many others found peace, some spirits are still restless, and they've found a way to seep into the present." Rachel looked around, the once comforting woods suddenly feeling oppressive. "What can we do?" Eleanor leaned in, her voice a whisper. "You must find the Heartstone. It's the only way to seal the rift permanently." As Rachel mulled over this revelation, Eleanor handed her a small leather-bound diary. "This belonged to me," she said. "It contains clues to the Heartstone's location. Guard it with your life." Suddenly, a cold wind blew through the clearing, and when Rachel looked up, Eleanor was gone. Determined to address this new challenge, Rachel immediately shared her encounter with the group. Meeting at Jeremy's library, they pored over Eleanor's diary. The pages were filled with sketches, notes, and cryptic riddles. One drawing, in particular, caught their attention, a stone radiating energy, surrounded by symbols. A handwritten note beside it read, "The key to unity, the anchor of realms." The quest for the Heartstone had begun. The group divided tasks based on the diary's clues. While Jeremy and Serena delved deeper into Pine Creek's history, Simon and Natalie embarked on a journey to meet elders from neighboring towns who might have knowledge about the Heartstone. Days turned into weeks. Each evening, the group reconvened, sharing their findings and piecing together the puzzle. The town, however, grew more restless. Shadows darted in alleyways, whispers echoed through the night, and residents reported seeing apparitions. One evening, as Rachel returned home, she found her house ransacked, the diary missing. Panic set in. Had one of the restless spirits taken it, or was there a more sinister player in the shadows? The stakes were higher than ever. Serena, trying to lift the group's spirits, suggested maybe the diary had served its purpose. Eleanor wanted us to find the Heartstone, and we have enough clues to continue our search. While the loss was disheartening, the group pressed on, their determination unwavering. Unknown to them, watching from the periphery was a figure shrouded in darkness, holding Eleanor's diary and smiling malevolently. The game was afoot, and the chase for the Heartstone was about to take a perilous turn. Chapter 12. The malevolent pursuer. The days grew shorter and the nights longer as Pine Creek descended into autumn. The wind carried a cold chill, and there was an unmistakable tension that permeated every street and alleyway. Residents whispered of the town's history coming alive, of shadows that seemed to have a life of their own. The townspeople, once dismissive of old legends, now bolted their doors come nightfall. The group was deeply entrenched in their search. With the diary gone, they relied heavily on the knowledge they had already gleaned, and their collective memory of Eleanor's cryptic notes. Serena had mapped out the locations of the symbols surrounding the Heartstone sketch. Interestingly, they matched with specific landmarks around Pine Creek. The symbols seemed to suggest a sequence, a path leading to the Heartstone's location. Rachel's house, still showing signs of the intrusion, had become their unofficial headquarters. They gathered there one evening, the room lit by candles, casting tall flickering shadows on the walls. Jeremy spoke up, breaking the tense silence. The symbols. They're not just landmarks. They're more like steps. Ritualistic steps. Natalie nodded, and we'll have to follow them in order to reach the Heartstone. Serena, tracing the paths on the map, added, the first symbol matches the old water well at the edge of the town. We should start there. As the group debated their next move, Simon's attention was drawn to the window. A face seemed to be peering in. Before he could shout a warning, the face disappeared. Jumping up, he rushed out, with Rachel and Jeremy in tow. The intruder was quick, but the glint of moonlight revealed a fleeting figure dashing through the trees. The pursuit led them deep into the woods, towards a familiar clearing. The ancient tree stood tall in the moonlight, its branches swaying ominously. But there was no sign of the intruder. Catching their breath, Rachel whispered, "Do you think it's one of them?" The restless spirits Eleanor mentioned? Jeremy, ever the rationalist, replied, "Could be a townsperson. Rumors have spread, and not everyone might be happy about us digging up the town's secrets." Their discussion was interrupted by a sudden gust of wind, carrying with it a chorus of whispers. The whispers grew louder, echoing the same phrase repeatedly, "The stone must not be found." Frozen in place, the trio felt an icy cold hand grip their hearts. The very air seemed thick with malevolence. Without a word, they turned and fled back to Rachel's house. Back at the sanctuary of Rachel's living room, they recounted their encounter. Serena, fear evident in her eyes, murmured, "We are not alone in this search. Whatever or whoever is after the Heartstone doesn't want us to find it." The realization was chilling. They were in a race against an enemy they did not fully understand. But why? What power did the Heartstone possess that warranted such aggressive deterrence? Determined to beat their unknown adversary, the group decided to visit the old water well the following evening. The next day seemed to crawl by. As evening descended, the group, armed with lanterns, made their way to the well. The well itself was ancient, its stones covered with moss. The water reflected the pale light of the moon. Rachel, after taking a deep breath, announced, "We should split up." Serena, Natalie, and I will investigate the well. Jeremy, Simon, keep watch. We don't know if our friend from last night might make an appearance." As Rachel and the girls began their inspection of the well, the unmistakable sound of whispers began again. Only this time, they seemed to be emanating from the well itself. Serena, her face pale, pointed to a series of symbols etched on the inside of the well. "This is it. The first clue." As she traced the symbols, a cold wind blew out their lanterns. Darkness enveloped them. A voice, different from the whispers but equally chilling, echoed around them. "Turn back now, or pay the price." Simon shouted from his lookout spot, "We've got company." Emerging from the shadows were figures, not just one but many. Their forms were translucent, and their faces twisted in anger and pain. The restless spirits had arrived. The group, back to back, circled the well, lanterns relit, casting an eerie glow around them. The spirits seemed hesitant to approach the light but remained a constant, menacing presence. Jeremy, his voice trembling, exclaimed, "We need to complete the ritual now." And so, under the relentless gaze of the spirits, surrounded by malevolence and the weight of Pine Creek's history, the group began to unravel the first step to finding the Heartstone. Chapter 13. The well's revelation. As the specters circled, their wails growing louder, the group's anxiety heightened. The ghosts, tortured souls forever trapped between realms, had become the guardians of Pine Creek's cursed history. Inside the moss-covered well, Serena, her fingers trembling, traced the first symbol, a crude depiction of a sun. The moment her finger made a full circle, the water below rippled. The reflected moonlight began to morph, revealing images beneath the water's surface. It showed the town, but from an era long past, perhaps during the town's founding. People in period clothing went about their daily lives, unaware they were being observed by the group centuries later. "Look," Natalie whispered, pointing to a young woman in a white dress, holding what appeared to be the Heartstone, glowing brilliantly in her hands. Eleanor. Eleanor seemed to be in a ceremony, surrounded by townsfolk, her voice chanting an incantation. As she spoke, she placed the Heartstone on a pedestal, and its light grew brighter, illuminating the entire gathering. Rachel gasped. "She's trying to seal away something. Look at the shadows." Indeed, inky black tendrils tried to approach Eleanor but were kept at bay by the Heartstone's glow. As the ceremony reached its climax, the Heartstone's radiance became blinding. When the light dimmed, Eleanor looked visibly drained, the stone dimmer and the shadows dissipated. The water's vision shifted, showing Eleanor, much older now, penning something in a diary, the same diary that had once been in their possession. "This isn't just history," Serena murmured, her voice shaky. "It's a warning." The visions faded, the moon's reflection restored. But the ghosts outside grew restless. Simon, clutching a lantern, whispered, "I don't think they liked us seeing that." Jeremy, ever logical even in the face of the supernatural, countered, "Or they're desperate for us to understand and break this cycle." Suddenly, the largest and most distinct of the specters stepped forward. Its features, though blurred by time and torment, were somewhat recognizable. The spirit's form resembled the town's founder, Benjamin Pine, as depicted in old town paintings. In a voice that sounded like the rustling of old leaves, Benjamin spoke. "The Heartstone must remain lost. The shadows it bound cannot be released." Rachel took a step forward, her voice brimming with determination. "We don't intend to release anything. But this town, these spirits, they need release." And the heartstone is the key. Benjamin's form wavered, his voice tinged with sorrow. Eleanor tried. She bound the shadows, but they're patient. The moment the heartstone is removed from its resting place, they will break free. Serena, gripping the edge of the well, inquired, "Then guide us. Help us do what Eleanor could not. Let's end this, once and for all." A tense silence followed. The other spirits seemed to be in quiet deliberation. Finally, Benjamin's ghostly form nodded. "Very well. But tread cautiously. The path ahead is perilous." He pointed towards the forest's edge, where a faint trail was visible. "Follow the old path. It leads to the Heartstone's chamber. But remember, it's not just about finding the stone. It's about understanding its power and using it wisely." Natalie, her face pale but her voice steady, asked, "What shadows did Eleanor bind?" Benjamin's voice held a grave note. "Not just shadows. Emotions. Despair. Rage. The very sentiments that threatened to destroy Pine Creek. They manifested as shadows, feeding on the town's fears." Jeremy, piecing it together, said, "So, the Heartstone doesn't just contain shadows. It holds the negative emotions of an entire town. If released. Quote. It would be catastrophic," Benjamin finished for him. The group, their resolve strengthened, nodded in unison. They were in this together, for the town and for Eleanor's legacy. As they prepared to venture deeper into the woods, the spirits, including Benjamin, faded into the night, leaving them with a chilling warning. Beware the heart of the forest, for it beats in tandem with the stone. The weight of their mission pressing down on them, the group, lanterns in hand, began their trek into the shadowy depths of the forest, unaware that eyes, both seen and unseen, watched their every step. Chapter 14. Through the veil of shadows, the ancient trees loomed above the group, their branches intertwining like skeletal fingers, creating a canopy that blocked out the moonlight. Only the occasional break in the dense foliage allowed a sliver of silver light to guide their way. The forest was eerily silent, save for the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant hoot of an owl. Serena's hand brushed the cold bark of a tree, feeling the deep grooves and knots under her fingers. She had the eerie sensation of the tree observing her, its centuries-old essence feeling her own fleeting existence. There was an awareness here, an old, watchful consciousness that stretched back far beyond human memory. Natalie, usually unshakable, clung to Rachel's arm. Every shadow seemed to play tricks on her eyes. "Do you see them?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Eyes. Everywhere." Rachel tried to reassure her, but even she felt the pervasive unease. The forest felt alive, but not in the way one would describe a thriving ecosystem. It felt like a sentinel, assessing their every move. "We should have brought more lanterns," Simon muttered, his voice echoing strangely. The path, barely visible, was littered with roots and underbrush, and more than once, someone stumbled. Suddenly, Jeremy halted. "Do you hear that?" They all strained their ears. At first, nothing. Then, faintly, the soft sound of a woman's voice singing. The melody was hauntingly beautiful, melancholic, and oddly familiar. "It's the lullaby," Serena exclaimed. "The one from Eleanor's diary." Drawn to the voice, they followed the sound, which grew louder and more distinct. The lyrics, in an old dialect, spoke of loss, love, and a deep yearning. As they walked, the dense trees gave way to a clearing bathed in moonlight. At its center stood a magnificent weeping willow, its long tendrils touching the ground. Beneath the tree sat a translucent figure, her long hair cascading over her shoulders. It was Eleanor, forever young, singing her lament. Upon seeing them, her singing ceased, and her expression became one of surprise and sadness. "You should not be here," she whispered, her voice carrying the weight of countless years. "We seek the Heartstone," Rachel said, stepping forward, "to end the curse and free the spirits bound to Pine Creek." Eleanor's eyes, filled with sorrow, met Rachel's. The Heartstone is both a blessing and a curse. It holds power unimaginable, but with that power comes responsibility. Serena, clutching the diary, approached the apparition. "Your words guided us. Your experiences, the pain you felt. We want to help." Eleanor looked at the diary, a tear forming in her eye. "I did what I believed was right. But the stone's power is not easily wielded. The shadows are but a manifestation of the collective pain of Pine Creek's inhabitants. To release them without understanding their origins would be catastrophic." Natalie, her voice soft, asked, "Then guide us. Teach us to understand." Eleanor hesitated. "It's not just about understanding. It's about acceptance. Can you accept the pain, the sorrow, and still choose hope?" A chilling wind swept through the clearing. From the forest's edge, dark tendrils began to emerge, snaking their way towards the group, drawn to Eleanor's presence. "We have to hurry," Eleanor said urgently. The shadows grow bolder. They sense the Heartstone's proximity. Jeremy, his voice filled with determination, declared, "Tell us what we need to do." Eleanor nodded. "Follow the moonlit path. It will lead you to the Heartstone's chamber. But once there, you must confront your own shadows, your fears, regrets, and sorrows. Only by acknowledging and accepting them can you hope to harness the stone's power." Serena tightened her grip on the diary. "We're ready." Eleanor's form began to fade, but her voice lingered. "Remember, the heart of Pine Creek beats within the stone. Guard it well." The shadows retreated, and the forest returned to its eerie silence. The group, with renewed determination, set off along the moonlit path, prepared to confront their deepest fears for the sake of Pine Creek. Chapter 15. Heartbeats in the darkness. The path Eleanor spoke of seemed almost too deliberate. Moonlight bathed it in a pure silvery glow, in stark contrast to the eerie darkness of the surrounding forest. Serena felt the weight of the diary in her hands, and its presence felt like an anchor grounding her to her mission. Rachel, leading the way, paused occasionally, her keen senses attuned to the environment. Her brow furrowed in concentration, and the rest could tell she was picking up on energies that lay beyond their perception. It made the journey even more tense, trusting in the unseen and unknown. Natalie's fear had transitioned from a panicky flutter to a steady, burning determination. How are we supposed to face our shadows? What does that even mean? She asked, glancing around at the group. It's symbolic, Simon mused. Maybe it's about confronting the parts of ourselves we'd rather not acknowledge. Our regrets, insecurities, the choices we've made. Jeremy shivered, though not from the cold. That sounds even scarier than the actual shadows. A deep chasm appeared ahead, its edges defined by the abrupt end of the moonlit path. Across it was a continuation of the path, leading into a cave entrance. The gap was too wide to jump across, but a series of stepping stones floated midair, leading the way across the gaping void. I don't remember this being in the diary, Serena whispered, staring wide-eyed at the hovering stones. Natalie approached the first stone hesitantly. As she placed her foot upon it, A memory flashed before her eyes. A young Natalie, tears streaming down her face, watching as her childhood pet bird flew away after she'd accidentally left its cage open. The stone beneath her foot felt solid, but the memory brought a pang of guilt and regret. Taking a deep breath, she whispered an apology to the long-lost bird and moved to the next stone. This time, the memory was of a friendship she had let fade away due to pride and stubbornness. Again, she acknowledged the pain and regret and made her peace with it. One by one, the group made their way across the chasm, each stone forcing them to face a personal regret or sorrow. By the time they reached the other side, there were tears, looks of anguish, but also a newfound understanding and acceptance in their eyes. The cave entrance beckoned. Inside, the walls pulsated with a deep blue luminescence, and the very air seemed to vibrate with energy. As they ventured deeper, they could hear the faintest of sounds, like the beating of a heart, growing louder with each step. In the center of a vast chamber stood a pedestal, and atop it, the Heartstone. It was unlike anything they'd ever seen, a crystal pulsating with a myriad of colors, and within, shadows moved, echoing the sorrows of Pine Creek. Jeremy approached it first, reaching out hesitantly. The moment his fingers brushed the stone, the chamber was filled with cries of despair and anguish. The walls themselves seemed to weep, and the ground trembled. He pulled back sharply, eyes wide with shock. It's overwhelming. The pain, the sorrow. It's all in there. Rachel stepped forward, her face a mask of determination. We need to unify our energies, confront the collective sorrow of Pine Creek. Together, they formed a circle around the Heartstone, hands linked. Closing their eyes, they delved deep into their minds, seeking out the shadows of Pine Creek. They saw the tragedies, the lost loves, the heartbreaks, and the despair that had accumulated over the centuries. Together, they channeled their newfound understanding and acceptance, willing the shadows to find peace. The chamber's atmosphere shifted. The cries of despair gradually transformed into whispers, then into a harmonious silence. As the last echo faded away, the Heartstone's pulsating colors settled into a calm, serene blue. They had done it. They had confronted and overcome the sorrows that had plagued Pine Creek for centuries. Exhausted but triumphant, they made their way out of the cave, the Heartstone safely ensconced in a bag Rachel carried. The moonlit path now felt welcoming, the forest less menacing. But as they neared the edge of Pine Creek, a deep, resonating voice echoed through the trees. The Heartstone is free, but so am I. The journey, it seemed, was far from over. Chapter 16. The Watcher in the Woods. As the group emerged from the thick canopy of whispering pines, the sudden drop in temperature was palpable. Serena clutched the diary to her chest, feeling its warmth seeping through her cold fingers. The message that echoed moments ago was still fresh in her mind, its haunting cadence sending shivers down her spine. Rachel, always the first to sense any shift in the environment, paused and tilted her head, as if listening to a distant, inaudible sound. "We're being watched," she whispered, her voice dripping with a mixture of caution and intrigue. Simon tightened his grip on Natalie's hand, his protective instincts on high alert. "By whom? The shadows?" She shook her head slowly, her gaze piercing through the thick underbrush. "No. Something older." Emerging from the dense forest, they found themselves on the outskirts of Pine Creek. It was as if the town had been untouched by time, bathed in the soft, eerie glow of the post-dusk twilight. Every window of every house was dark, save for the sporadic flickering of candles, casting unsettling, dancing shadows. The townspeople, Jeremy muttered, gazing at the silent houses. Do you think they know? Serena, reading a passage from Eleanor's diary, said, Eleanor mentioned an entity, a guardian of sorts, bound to the Heartstone. Its role was to protect the stone and the memories it held. With the Heartstone now free, this guardian might see us as intruders or threats. Natalie's eyes widened. So, we're not just dealing with the shadows of Pine Creek's past, but also a supernatural guardian? A rustling sound from the woods caught their attention. A shadowy figure, tall and lanky, with elongated limbs, stood just beyond the tree line. Its eyes, if it had any, were hidden in the inky blackness of its form, but the group could feel its gaze, cold and penetrating. Rachel took a step forward, her voice firm. We mean no harm. We seek only to heal the wounds of this place. For a moment, there was silence, the tension palpable. Then, in a voice that sounded like the rustling of dried leaves, the entity replied, The Heartstone was my charge. In your hands, its power may be misused. Jeremy, ever the diplomat, spoke up. We understand the importance and sensitivity of what we hold. Our intentions are pure. We want to help Pine Creek find peace. The entity seemed to consider this for a moment. Many have come before you, with promises of peace. Yet, the shadows persist. How are you any different? Serena stepped forward, holding out Eleanor's diary. We have knowledge, passed down through generations. We have faced the sorrows trapped within the Heartstone and seek to mend the rift between the living and the memories of the past. A long, drawn-out sigh, like the wind passing through the trees, filled the air. Very well, the entity murmured. But know this, the Heartstone's power is vast. If misused, it can plunge this town into eternal darkness. With that ominous warning, the shadowy figure receded into the woods, disappearing as suddenly as it had appeared. The group exchanged uneasy glances. The weight of their responsibility felt even heavier now. They had not only the memories of Pine Creek to contend with, but also a watchful guardian ensuring they stayed on the right path. As they moved deeper into the town, guided by the soft luminescence of the Heartstone, the air grew colder, filled with the murmurs of voices long gone. They knew that their journey was far from over, and the challenges they would face would test the very fabric of their resolve. But with each step, their determination grew stronger, fortified by the knowledge that they held the key to Pine Creek's salvation. We hope you have enjoyed our version of Whispering Pines Campground Paranormal Ghost Story. Please visit us at Paranormal Untold Stories. Come to listen to more of our scary stories collection. Paranormal Untold Stories encourages you to contact us if you have your own untold story that you would like our professionals team to put online as a scary story. Thank you. Please follow our YouTube channel, Paranormal Untold Stories, and encourage others to do the same. Paranormal Untold Stories.